Hello, Curious Cat Crime Sunday users and followers. This is Shelby, and we're going to try something new and not do the intro today. So, I have my lovely Ziggy by my side, and today's episode is going to be on Robert Hoagland, who also goes by Hoagie. He is from Newton, Colorado, and let's get to it. So, Robert Hoagland, otherwise known as Hoagie, by his family and friends, was born June 9th, 1963, and he did die December 5th, 2022. A little bit of giving it away because this is a disappearance, missing person story, but I wanted you to know. He was a resident of Newton, Connecticut, in the United States who disappeared in 2013. So that was only 9 years before his death. His whereabouts were unknown, with some investigators fearing he had met with foul play. Anyways, back to the story. On the morning of July 28, 2013, security footage at a mobile gas station in Newtown captured Hoagland, or Hoagie, a local chef and property appraiser, buying a map along with fuel for his wife's car. Now, it was said that he really enjoyed maps. If you opened his car door, he would have hundreds of maps. He did not like GPS, and he liked to collect them. So this was not abnormal for him. He was last seen by anyone who knew him later that morning when his son bid goodbye as Hoagland was mowing the lawn in the family home, a conversation also witnessed by the neighbor. Hoagland failed to show up for work the next morning or pick his wife up as she returned home from overseas in the trip that afternoon. He was reported missing. A little bit of background. Robert Hoagland and his wife Lori, a culinary arts teacher at Newtown High School, lived on Glen Road in Sandy Hook neighborhood of Newtown, Connecticut, where they had raised their 3 sons to young adulthood. The couple had at one point separated for 2 years, but later reconciled. Lori stated they had begun planning their retirement. Now, his wife was overseas with a childhood friend, and she had emailed him to ask if he was going to pick her up. However, she never got a response. But he went about telling their friends that he was going to pick her up. So she assumed that by that he was going to pick her up. She waited 2 hours before realizing something must have been wrong. Robert and Lori's 24-year-old son, Max Hoagland, had a history of problems of drug addiction and had been to rehab earlier in 2013. Robert left his restaurant job for a position at a friend's law firm to better help his son with his recovery. He also worked as a real estate appraiser. Robert and Lori had talked about going on a hiking trip with Max to the Appalachian Trails that summer. And as part of the effort, in July, Lori went on a 2-week trip to Turkey with some friends, as I had mentioned. She and Robert regularly exchanged emails while she was away. In the weeks before Lori's return, 2 of the family's laptops had gone missing and were stolen. Robert came to believe that Max had taken them either to sell or exchange them to obtain drugs. He sent an email to Lori apologizing for having let it happen. Investigators later learned that Robert had traveled to an abandoned industrial building in Bridgeport to confront some men they described as Max associates over the theft, which Max had said they were responsible for. On July 25th, $600 was withdrawn from one of the family's bank accounts. Robert and Lori spoke briefly on the phone the evening of July 27th, confirming his plans to pick her up and return from Turkey of John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York City 2 days later. Early the next morning, he went out in his wife's Volkswagen Golf to buy bagels for breakfast at the local bakery. This was a normal thing for him on weekends, says his son, who said that he always would go and buy a dozen bagels and they would share them together. So, now, as I mentioned, this is a disappearance case, and let's get into the disappearance. He then stopped at a mobile station on Churchill Road and near Interstate 84 to get gas. Security cameras inside recorded him paying for the fuel and also buying a map, as I stated before, of the eastern United States. This was at 6:45 a.m. It would be the last documented public sighting of Robert Hoagie. Upon Robert's return home, he and Max had breakfast. After the meal, Max said later, his father paid some bills and played Scrabble online for a while. Around 10 to 11 a.m., Robert went out to mow the lawn. While he was doing so, Max went out in the Volkswagen, telling his father he expected to be back a few hours later. A neighbor also told police they saw the 2 talking on the lawn. The next day, however, Robert was not at the airport to pick up Lori. and Lori had arrived at 4 p.m. She tried calling both the home and the cell phone, but no answer at either. She assumed that he was in traffic on his way there and that his battery was dead. This happens to him frequently, she said later. And Lori did not initially return to Newton, instead going to a relative's home nearby. She learned from another phone call to Rob's boss's wife that he had not shown up that morning. When Lori finally arrived home on July 30th, now mind you, this was 3 days after she landed, I want to say it was, Robert was not in the house. Instead, she found his keys, his phone, his passport, his prescription high blood pressure medication, as well as dirty clothes in the laundry. The mower Robert had been using had been returned to its usual storage location, and the loafers he had been wearing when he went out the morning shopping trip, his preferred summertime footwear, was also in the house, as was his other pair. His Mini Cooper was still parked in the driveway. Puzzling. Also, I know that was a very sarcastic comment, but you will see why it is not a horrible thing to say at the end, okay? So I shouldn't have said it, but keep in mind, you haven't heard the rest of the story. Now, let's get into the investigation. Anyways, a little bit about what sparked this interest in me was the 2016 producers of Investigation Discovery, series Disappeared, focus an episode on Hoagland's disappearance. I was just in the hospital, and when I go to the hospital, I watch the HLN channel, which had this episode on it, and it was very interesting. It was very they had a disappearance one on before, but I only caught the ending, and I like disappearances with an ending, right? So this was an interesting one. So the episode focused on Hoagland's disappearance. Since there had been no significant leads or sightings since late 2014, a Newtown police and Hoagland's family, who cooperated, were hopeful that it would produce some new information. The episode was A Family Man, and it aired on May 31st in 2016. The Hoagland family informed the National Park Service that Robert may have gone on his own to hike the Appalachian Trail, along with friends of the family. The Park Services printed and distributed flyers of Hoagie's picture and went to bring media attention to the case. The Newtown police looked into the case as well and soon learned the events after Robert's appearance, such as the confrontation in Bridgeport and the cash withdrawal. A week after his disappearance, Robert's personal information was entered into the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System database. And on August 6th, Lori found Robert's wallet and car's keys hidden under a doll in the chair in the bedroom. That's very odd. She had later that this led her to change her original theory that her husband had left voluntarily to include the possibility that he may have been abducted. Around that time, Max pled guilty to criminal trespassing and was released from jail. Police questioned the two men who said that they had stolen, Max said that had stolen laptops, but could not establish a link to Robert's disappearance. Max also denied any knowledge of his father's whereabouts. Lori later said the arrest was unconnected to the disappearance. Police also searched Robert's work computer, where he found that several times an address in Rhode Island. No connection was found in the disappearance when it was investigated. A similar search on his home computer was frustrated due to a program which he had apparently downloaded and installed a month before his disappearance that allowed users to delete all records of search and results. In the fall, Lori volunteered to search the wooded area in and around Sandy Hook. Police brought in search dogs as well. The Newtown police used sonar to search Lake Zoar, Zoar, along with Houstonic River on the edge of town in September. None of these efforts turned up a trace for Robert, and Lori said searches were about eliminating possibilities. The next month, Chris Hogan, the couple's eldest son, left his job in the tourism industry at the Hilton Head in South Carolina to take over his father's responsibilities around the house. In September 2013, the Hoagland family finally began the court process necessary to appoint a trustee to represent Robert's interests, although they had hoped it would not be necessary. Let's get into some possible sightings, okay? Later in September 2013, two sightings of men matching Hoagland's description were reported in Rhode Island, which borders Connecticut to the east. A man with a backpack was seen walking along Rhode Island Route 117 near and Interstate 95 near Warwick. It turned out to be someone else. A short time later, Rhode Island Department of Transportation workers also reported seeing a similar looking man, also with a backpack, walking alongside Rhode Island Route 165 near the Connecticut state line of Voluntown, Voluntown. Since I'm so horrible at pronouncing things, I think I'm going to start spelling them. Or, like I've done in previous videos, I'll put it up on the screen if I can't spell it, if it's long or whatever the case may be. Anyways, police were unable to locate that man or determine his identity. Then, another one. In December 2013, Los Angeles Police Department asked citizens in the area to be on the lookout for Robert, his family said his connections to several Los Angeles suburbs, including Hollywood. While no significant sightings were reported in Los Angeles, another sighting came in January when a tipster reported seeing Robert at a Savers thrift store in Brookfield, just north of Newtown. He was reportedly driving a car with New York license plates. However, review of security camera from the store was inconclusive. Around the 1-year anniversary of Robert's disappearance in late July 2014, another sighting near Newton was reported. A man told officers of the Putnam County, New York Sheriff's Office that he had seen Robert going into a county jail in Carmel, the county seat, a short distance from Connecticut, and then leaving after 2 minutes. However, the only video footage the county could find that may have shown the man was from a building's exterior, and the man on it could not conclusively be identified. At the time, some friends of Hoagie's family complained about the slow pace of the search. They believed the possibility of criminal activity was highly likely in this case, and that police had tactically concluded that he had left the area on his own accord in order to devote less resources to the investigation. All we know is that he went to Churchill Road Mobil gas station, filled up a car, bought a map. We're at the same place we were day one, said an officer. Critics faulted the police for not publicizing the case more or listing the assistance of other law enforcement agencies. In his defense, Kehoe, Kehoe, said detectives were still putting a lot of effort into the investigations. So, in my notes, I didn't really get to find out who Kehoe is, but that's what he said. In November 2014, Newtown police received another tip that Robert might be working in a restaurant in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. They clarified to a local newspaper that the tipster had not claimed to have actually seen him, only that he might be there. Their counterpoints in Horry, Horry County, where Myrtle Beach is located, provided assistance. At that time, Richard Robinson, a Newtown supervising detective, stated, "We cannot say for how long it may be before it's known where Mr. Hoagland is in South Carolina or not." So let's get into some theories. Everything is on the table. Newtown Police Chief Charles Kehoe, so I didn't know, said in 2014 as to what might have happened to Robert. Two possibilities emerged. Either he was the victim of foul play or he decided to walk away from his whole life. There was significant evidence of both possibilities, and neither emerged as more likely. One was just as equal to the other. After Lori discovered her husband's wallet and keys hidden in their bedroom, she became to believe foul play was the stronger possibility. She believed, and still accounted for, 600 to be an odd amount to withdraw if Robert was planning to disappear. The amount was more than could be withdrawn at the automatic teller machine, yet nowhere enough to live on for an extended period of time. Concerning their earlier separation, she stated, if he wanted out of the marriage, all he had to do was say that he wanted out of the marriage. But this was not remotely where we were. His son Chris also found it unlikely that his father left wearing neither pair of loafers, the only shoes he ever wore, he said. Lori said she believed that it was possible that where his children were concerned, Robert could have made some someone feel scared enough to do him harm in return. I've seen him chase people down the street with baseball bats, said Danbury News Time. Friends and family also do not believe that he would just walk away from his children so readily. I don't believe he just left, said Lori. Wouldn't he have surfaced by now? Now, mind you, this is in... I don't remember when that was, so it was at least a few years after. So it's like, if you're going to disappear, you're going to show up, especially only with $600 in your pocket. Even if you get a job, how are you going to live on that? Now, I don't know prices of rent over there, but I know prices of rent here, which is cheaper from where I'm from, and there's no way. The Hoagland family believed that Robert was no longer in the Newtown area. He's going to be stumbled upon, Lori said. Someone's going to find him on accident, and I hope they find him sooner than later. His son, Chris, stated was, what if he was taken and he's in a hole somewhere? I don't want to think about it, but I have to. Later in 2013, so this is going to be the end part of the episode. Still a bit to go, but this is the end part. Later in 2013, Hoagland, using the name Richard King, began working as a contract basis as a property appraiser for a small firm in town of Wallkill, New York, outside of Middleton. By the end of the year, he found housing through Craigslist. He moved into a rented home in Rock Hill, New York, and roughly 100 miles or 160 kilometers, west of Newtown, with a local high school music teacher and musician named David. David, who had recently moved out of his home following a divorce, told Albany Times-Union that Rich had at the time he moved in told him that he, too, had just separated from his wife and was new to the area. Asked for identification, he had none. I asked him, and he said that he had left it behind. He said he left everything behind. He said he was divorced and children were adults, and that he was just looking for a start to a new life. Hoagie brought a few possessions with him, some clothing, accessories, and a small bed. He drove a car that his employer loaned him. Since David's lease barred him from subletting to anyone, Hoagland did not have to be added to it, negating the need for a background check. The landlord never learned that Hoagland had lived there until after the two had moved out. Hoagland paid his share of the rent and later the utilities in cash. David later put him on a cell phone plan. The two remained roommates even after David bought a house nearby in 2020. They exchanged Christmas gifts. Mind you, okay, this is 2020. He disappeared 2013. Okay, anyways, so keep going. They exchanged Christmas gifts and developed a routine of eating Sunday dinner, which Hoagie usually cooked, and watching sports, particularly football, together. David said Hoagland told him a few details about his former life in Connecticut, including that his son had struggled with drug addiction. Outside of home and work, Hoagland often volunteered at the soup kitchen in nearby Monticello. He would frequently be there to cook on Thanksgiving and Christmas Eve. He knew his way around the kitchen, recalled the head cook. So, here's the sad part. In mid-2022, David said Hoagland went to see a doctor who advised him to change his diet. Hoagland began cooking seafood and grilled vegetables for Sunday dinner instead of steaks and barbecue ribs they had customarily enjoyed. Right? Yeah, customarily enjoyed. David noticed that Hoagland was slowing down, in quotes, as his health seemed to be declining. Later that year, Hoagland told him that his son soon to be receiving some mail under another name. David did not inquire as to why, out of respect for his roommate's privacy, but he believed Hoagland was trying to address his neglected health as he was not sure Hoagland had insurance. On December 4th, David returned home after a weekend performing with his band in New York City. He saw the car Hoagland drove, and which had uncharacteristically been present in the driveway when he had left the day before. So it's in the same exact spot. A Saturday, when Hoagland usually left for work early, was still there that evening. He received security camera footage that showed Hoagland had been holding his back as he entered the house the night of December 3rd. After Hoagland did not come out of his room to make Sunday dinner and go for work the next morning, David grew concerned. At David's request, a friend stopped by the house during the day to check, but no answer at the door. Hold on. Texts he sent his roommate were not answered, and finally, after work, he went into Hoagland's room and found him unresponsive and not breathing. David attempted CPR, but to no avail. Police who responded to David's 911 had difficulty ascertaining the dead man's identity, since he said nothing but Richard King on it. They had found some letters Hoagland had advised David he would be receiving, the Hoagland's name on them. Sullivan County officials worked in conjunction with Newtown police to confirm the identity. At last, Robert Hoagland was age 59 years old. In an interview, Dave said, "I just want people to know there was nothing strange about his life other than the fact that he was able to disappear for 9 years." And this is the end of the story, as David passed away, and sadly, this family did not find out until after he had passed. And I think it's very sad, and I really wish I knew more on this. If you do know more on this, please leave a comment. I would love links, anything like that, to get to do research on it. Oh, I forgot. I was going to tell you about the conspiracy theory. This was in the episode that I had watched. I didn't really get to hear most of it because the doctor had come in during this, but it was something to do with the fact that since it had happened a few years after the Newtown elementary school shooting and he disappeared, they thought he was somehow involved. Very far stretch, if you ask me. But nonetheless, I love conspiracies, so it was interesting to hear that. But yeah, very, very far stretch. Because I think they said something like 7 years or 4 years. That's a long time to hide out before running away due to helping. So, anyways, this has been today's episode, this week's episode. I hope you guys have a great Monday with a great week to come. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and like so you don't miss the next one. And I hope to hear from you soon. Leave a comment and a like. And if you love Ziggy, also leave a like and say hi to him because he's a sweet boy. And we love you and have a great week. Bye.